everybody. This is Steve Marinucci, and welcome to Beatles News Briefs number 118. On today's show, I have a discussion with British writer Spencer Leigh, and we talk about British music heritage. He's involved in Liverpool with the Liverpool Music Heritage Walk, and he also is going to tell us what the history is of some of the reclamation projects in Liverpool. And we'll talk a little bit of music history on top of that because he's written 2 books on the firing of Pete Best. And he also knows a lot about other Beatle history too. We'll talk about all of that. And we'll also have a review of Peter Asher Everywhere Man. In last time's show, 117, you saw an interview I did with Dana Goldfein and Dan Giller, the co-producers of the movie. Today, I'm going to review it, and I'm going to tell you already, it's an excellent movie. If it's coming in your area in film festivals, because it won't be in theaters until early June, make sure you see it because it's a great film. It really is. And we will talk to Luis Lopez, who was one of the lucky 39, as I like to call him, if you get the honeymooners joke, that went to the Paul McCartney listening session on Thursday the 16th. And he'll talk about what it was like to get the invitation, the trip to where the listening session was held, seeing Paul McCartney, what they heard, and what he thought of the album. So that's what we've got in store this time. Let's get to it. I am very pleased to welcome writer and broadcaster Spencer Leigh, coming from Liverpool. He's been a broadcaster since the 70s. Your first book was published in 73 on Paul Simon. You've done several books on the Beatles, including one called Drummed Out about the Pete Best firing, and he updated it called Best of the Beatles. I have the Kindle version of the revise looking in front of me. He's on the Beatle Heritage Committee. There's just so much here. Spencer,
I just have a great time.
Yeah, it is awesome. It is awesome to have you here. Initially, when I contacted you, we talked about the Rock Heritage Trail. I'm assuming that this incorporates everybody, not just the Beatles, correct?
Yeah, and you can't save everything. Otherwise, we can't preserve a city in cotton wool, as it were. So some things have to go. But we're fighting for certain things to be kept, certainly. And the whole history of English popular music really centers almost around Liverpool. So much happened in Liverpool. One of the first rock and roll pop stars was Billy Fury.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, in fact, down at the Albert Dock, a statue for Billy Fury. And he always looked as though he had the coat hanger still in his jacket. So he sang like that, but he looked astonishingly handsome. You probably don't know him because he hardly had anything out in America. But this guy was absolutely super cool. And when I interviewed Paul McCartney once, he said, I really didn't give Billy Fury too much attention because we were listening to the Americans back then. But he said, I can see now this guy was great. He had charisma in bucketfuls. He was wonderful.
You had a lot of guys in Liverpool that were great.
Yeah, and the odd thing is that Billy Fury heard about this place Percy Phillips is that could do demonstration records, and he went to them about 4 days before the Beatles, the Quarrymen did.
Oh my!
So Percy Phillips had Billy Fury, and then the Beatles. And Percy Phillips's place, now that's still there today, and that's student accommodation now. But I was actually in there about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and it was great to stand in the room where the Beatles or the Quarrymen had done In Spite of All the Danger, and That'll Be the Day, and Billy Fury as well.
Yeah, that's great. Does that place have a plaque on it at the moment? Or
there's been a plaque up for some time, yes, but it is difficult when places are used for some other purposes as well, because you don't want the people who are in the place to be disturbed. John Lennon, when he was at art school, he was in Gambier Terrace, But there are people who are working in those houses now, art students and the like, and you really don't want them to have a bad time with people constantly knocking on the door. So
Sure.
it is a difficult thing. But there are so many sites that people can see on Merseyside, and we just put up 12 heritage plaques, and they're around the city centre. The ones we've done at the moment, it takes you about 90 minutes to do them all and see them. And sometimes the place isn't there anymore, but it has so much history that it should be there, really. And if you take Liverpool Stadium, that was a boxing stadium. Now, the interesting thing for Liverpool Stadium to begin with was the manager of Liverpool Stadium was Johnny Best, Pete Best's father.
Right.
And so
Right.
he organized quite a lot of big fights in that stadium. And in the war, he made a very generous gesture to the BBC that they could broadcast any fights from there, anything that happened, to entertain the public. So why the public would want to listen to boxing matches when so much else was going on, I don't know. But so he had the boxing stadium there. And in 1956, there had been a ban for many years on American musicians coming to England, because it was said this didn't encourage the English musicians. Absolute bonkers, of course, because Louis Armstrong was so brilliant that if people saw him, they'd get inspired. And anyway, Louis Armstrong came over in 1956 and he played the Liverpool Stadium, which interestingly enough had a circular stage, so you could actually walk around and see the whole show if you kept on walking.
Wow.
And Louis Armstrong did really well, and he was supported by the Mississippi Jazz Band, who started in 1948. You're not going to believe this. I am going to their final concert next week. They were on the bill for the first show at the Cavern in January 1957, and they often played with the beat groups, including the Beatles. John Lennon in particular was rather annoyed with them because he said, "You're keeping us off the stage." In actual fact, when the Mississippi Jazz Band were actually members of the Musicians Union.
Okay.
And the Liverpool groups weren't. And I don't think the Beatles joined the Musicians Union until the start of 1963. Therefore means that when there was a bill and it had, say, the Mississippi Jazz Band and the Beatles, the Mississippi Jazz Band had to top the bill because the Musicians Union Act couldn't be second on the bill to a group that wasn't in the union. So there are all these things that are going on, and it's quite fascinating, really. But the Mississippi Jazz Band were terrific, and there's such a great sense of humor on Merseyside, as you can imagine. Now, in 1948, a lot of jazz records came over with the Cunard Yanks. The fact that they brought the rock and roll records over because Chuck Berry and Eddie Cochran and the like were released in the UK anyway. But anyway, they brought the jazz records over, and there was a place on the other side of the Mersey, Wallasey, part of Merseyside, which had a rhythm club where jazz fans listened to the records and heard them. And some of those jazz fans decided in 1948 that they would form a band, and that was the Mississippi Jazz Band, and that's how it all started. So there was this great feeling of music on Merseyside.
Any of the original members of the band still that used to play in the Cavern with the Beatles, or any of those guys?
There are a few of them, but most of them have actually gone by now, and they've gone in the last few years. There are some who do odd bits of work, but most of them, if they are alive, they can't really be out performing anymore. Having said that, the Searchers just don't give up. I went to the Searchers' final concert, which was said to be their final concert about 3 years ago. But still work comes along and they do it. So John McNally is still out there. He has a bit of trouble with his shoulder, but apart from that, he's okay. And Frank Allen is still with the Searchers, so that's a good band. But you don't see many of the originals now. And if you do, if you see them like King Size Taylor in his last months and everything, it's a bit sad to see them, actually, because you think of what they were like.
Yeah. I just talked to Debbie Greenberg, and she mentioned the jazz band in the cavern. It's incredible that they were still together after all this time.
Oh yeah, oh, they've had lots of changes in personnel too.
I'm sure they have. I'm sure they have.
So the originals are getting on for 100 now, if they're still alive. Yeah, but it's a very vibrant scene. There's an awful lot of music around, and some of them have different hobbies. Denny Satan and the Sabres, who lives a few roads away from me, he collected sheet music of all the songs that the Beatles and other bands covered. So that's a very impressive little collection he's got there. You don't think of people collecting that, but they do.
Let's talk about the rock heritage sites that are being preserved.
We'll start with the Beatles ones. There's a cavern, obviously, but that's got so many plaques up around it. You can hardly get in there for the plaques now. The cavern is of world importance. If somebody wrote a letter and just put the cavern on the envelope, it'd get here.
Okay.
And that's great. And I still loved going to the cavern. You have about 300 people standing in there, and it's very sweaty and everything. But if you have the right person on, it's really good. And then a little bit down the road from that, you have, well, opposite, really, you have Eric's Club, which was a great pub, which was a great scene around the time of punk rock and the like. And you had the Sex Pistols who played there, Elvis Costello, who comes from Liverpool, he played there, lots of other bands too. So that's important. So it's interesting that you've got the Cavern and Eric's on different sides of the road. Further down the road, you've got Probe Records, which was a great record shop because they refused to sell you things, or they wouldn't get them for you if they didn't approve of it. And they were always trying to sell people Captain Beefheart records and the like, which is wonderful. So that was a great shop, Probe, a really eccentric shop. I'm surprised it made any money, but it lasted for quite some time. And then about 30 or 40 yards from that, it hasn't got a rock heritage site, but you can see it. And that is a sculpture of Eleanor Rigby, because there was, I suppose, about 20 years ago now, Tommy Steele was in Liverpool in a big musical production, and he was doing a live broadcast at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And on the news, it said that it was about time there was a Beatles statue in Liverpool. And Tommy Steele heard it on the news and said, "I'm a sculptor, I'll make one, and I won't charge you anything for it." And he made one of Eleanor Rigby. And it's a wonderful statue because Eleanor Rigby has got the football boots on as well as dressed as Eleanor Rigby. It's just a beautiful statue. And I remember walking down there once with John Stewart, who made Fire in the Rain and Gold and the like. And he saw this statue of Eleanor Rigby and he got his cigarettes out and he said, "Have a cigarette." So that was really, really nice.
Is that near the cemetery where she is?
No, that's St. Peter's Church. That's outside. That's a couple of miles outside Liverpool. But about 30 or 40 yards from the Eleanor Rigby statue, you've got Whitechapel. And Whitechapel was a very important street, a really cool street, because so much happened there. You've got Nems, which was Brian Epstein's shop. Now, Brian Epstein, and this is what makes me say that the Cunard Yank story is rubbish, actually, because Brian Epstein decided he was a great record retailer. I went in there quite a lot. It's my shop of choice, actually. And he loved people asking for records by number. If I went to the counter and I'm 15 years old, first of all, he'd say to me, "What would you like, sir?" So being a 15-year-old and addressed as sir, that was wonderful. And I'd say, "I'd like top rank JAR 587. And he would go, "Ah, yes, the Shirelles," and he'd get "Will You Love Me Tomorrow" out or something like that and give it to you. So he knew the numbers of all the records. So when we went in to buy our records, we liked giving the number to Brian Epstein because he knew them all. And that just shows that he was actually a wonderful record retailer. He knew what the public wanted and and the numbers that he should order and the like. And he didn't make many mistakes. He did think that the Everly Brothers Muskrat was going to be a big hit, and it wasn't. And he overordered and that, but most of the time he was absolutely spot on. It always puzzles me, and I don't know the answer to this. I must ask Mark Lewison sometime. Why didn't the Beatles do a signing for their first single in Nems? because Brian Epstein had some signings before then. In fact, there was someone who was at Quarry Bank School called Mal Perry, who made a cover version of Jimmy Rogers' "Make Me a Miracle," and Brian Epstein said, "You can we can have copies at the store and you could sign them." So he got that idea in his head. But oddly enough, he didn't do it for the Beatles. It may be that so much was happening. You mentioned, just before we get off it, you mentioned Eleanor Rigby's grave. That's at St. Peter's Church in the Woolton area, which is where you go if you want to see where John Lennon lived, where Paul McCartney lived. And it's a beautifully kept church, in fact. And there's John Lennon's Uncle George is buried there. They gave him a new gravestone quite recently. And there's quite a lot of connections with that church and the Beatles.
Are there other places too that are being honored?
Oh, yes. The idea is to do quite a lot of rock heritage sites now. I won't go into them now, but there's one road that goes up from the centre of Liverpool up towards the cathedral. And a lot of clubs like the Lomax and the like were there in the 70s. And there's plaques up for them because they've gone now. It's really nice to have these things and to have the reminder of all this.
Do they all have plaques? Do all the sites have plaques?
No, we've put 12 up at the moment, and there's going to be more. I mean, as well as a plaque for NEMS, which is where the shop was, there's also a very good statue of Brian Epstein. The trouble with that statue is that I think the sculptor made it too big. So that if you have your photograph taken with Brian Epstein and that statue, he looks about 8 foot, so everybody looks too small. But it's a really good statue. And yeah, it's nice to walk around the town and see all these things. I mentioned Billy Fury earlier. Now, he always looked as though he got a coat hanger in his jacket, so he would look like that. But as you go towards the dock, you can see him in the distance looking like that. And from half a mile away, you think that's Billy Fury. And that says to me, that is a really good statue. And he's quite close to the statues that they've got of the Beatles as well. There's a very good statue of the 4 Beatles at the pier head. 4
Right.
Beatles about 1963.
What's the procedure for getting added to one of these sites? Is there a petition that starts it, or what?
No, we just toss it around between ourselves and decide what the best places are. At the moment, one of the things we want to preserve is in 1962, when the Beatles had Ringo Starr, Brian Epstein wanted to have some professional photographs taken of them. He wanted those photographs to say Liverpool in some way. Quite why he wanted that, I don't know. But the photographer took the Beatles down to the pier head. And there was a salvage ship there called the SS Salvor. And the Beatles went on board this ship. You've probably seen the photographs of the Beatles with the SS Salvor and the like.
Yeah, I think I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, someone discovered the mast of SS Salvor in a scrapyard.
Oh, my.
And we've managed to get a ban put on it so that nobody can get rid of it. And it's just finding the finance so that it can be put up again somewhere. And it's really hanging on to it until the perfect opportunity comes along, because it will be great for people to be taken by that mast. You could put the photographs of the Beatles down at the bottom, and that's what they look like. And then you can stand by the mast too. And it's a lovely connection between Liverpool and the sea and the Beatles.
In Mark Lewison's Evolver 62 movie that just came out recently, he goes to a couple of places. One of them is the airport. He goes to the airport, and he said the airport is pretty much the same as it was. And he goes to a couple of other places. He goes in one place that I believe he said that Sin and John lived in. The one, do you know the one I'm referring to?
Yes, John Gorman of Scaffold lived there too. It's quite a rock and roll house. Brian Epstein had the place originally for his assignations, as it were, and he let John and Cynthia have it when they got married. So yes, that is still there, and it's one of these lovely old houses in Liverpool. And I love the combination of the old and the new in Liverpool. And in fact, a lot of films are made in Liverpool now. And some of these roads that have cobble streets like Faulkner Street, The residents, I suppose, are given so much not to come out of their front door on certain days, and then the film's going to be shot there. But it's really lovely. Liverpool, I think, is on a boom at the moment, really. I do feel that in America, of course, you're used to very big distances. We're not in this country, and there's a tendency to say Manchester's got nothing to do with us because it's 30 miles away. Whereas, in fact, you could get a whole touring package that would involve Liverpool, the suburbs, Manchester, and lots of musicians who were involved in that, and make something really good for tourists, I think. But nobody's done that. I think putting Liverpool and Manchester together is probably a step too far for most people.
No, I've lost what I was going to say. Is there a lot of work being done on the city to tear things down? Is it difficult to save things now?
When Liverpool was the European Capital of Culture in 2008, there was a lot of building that went on then, and a lot of places came down, which was fine. What they built was fine, but it was a pity they had to destroy the whole city to do it. But now I think that's pretty well stopped now. They're not getting rid of buildings and refurbishing them. And something like the Cunard building, which is where people went if they were going to go to America. The Cunard building now is a British music experience, which is a lovely thing. It's owned by Harvey Goldsmith, and a really good exhibition with quite a lot of weird stuff in there too. For example, one of the key players of the early Beat days was Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. You may have heard of them. They had a UK #1 with Shaking All Over. And somebody had obviously gone along to Johnny Kidd's widow and said, "Can we have one of his eye patches, please?" And that's in a cabinet there. So that seems weird, but they've got a lot of great stuff there. And they've got an AI Boy George who performs every couple of hours as well. Yeah, so they're a bit ahead of the game there. But it's very good, and I think that's got a great deal of possibilities. But I think the problem that they have is that their exhibition is about rock and roll in general. There's a lot about Liverpool in there and a lot about the Beatles, but there's a lot of other artists who aren't connected to Liverpool in particular. And I think in Liverpool itself, that is a hard sell because most people who come to Liverpool want the Liverpool connections.
I know Paul makes occasional appearances in Liverpool, but Ringo does not, does he? Am I right about that?
Well, he has performed with his all-star band.
Okay.
But he made a mistake in the early 2000s by coming to Liverpool and playing, and then appearing on a BBC TV show a couple of days later. And Jonathan Ross, the presenter, said to him, "I bet you like being back in Liverpool." And he said, "What would I want to be back in there for?" Now, I think it was a Ringo joke that went wrong, but Liverpool people didn't like that at all.
Hearing about that.
Yeah, and the papers and the local radio station were absolutely full of calls of people who were saying, "This man has made millions out of Liverpool and he's now dissing the place. You've got to talk it up." And if I was Ringo, I would have apologized immediately and said it was a joke. It went wrong. I'm terribly sorry. And he didn't, and he should have done. But there we are. Whether everybody's forgiven him now or not, I really don't know.
I remember writing several years ago about the move to save his house or tear it down.
Oh, yes, yeah. Ringo's family was the most impoverished of the four Beatles, I think, really.
Right.
And he lived in the Welsh Streets area of the Dingle, actually fairly close to where Billy Fury lived. And all the streets had Welsh names because of the architect Richard Owens had built them. Ringo was born in 9 Madryn Street. And then the family moved to 10 Admiral Street, which was the street alongside it. And I think the grandmother lived in the street somewhere too. Madryn Street might have gone by now, but Admiral Street was there where Ringo spent many years. And the person who had that house, and it really was only 2 rooms up, 2 rooms down, was a wonderful old lady who people could knock on the door and she'd let them in and let them see it. A real security problem, I would have thought, but she didn't mind at all. And that was terrific. And just around the corner from those streets was the Emperor's Pub. and the Empress Pub features on Ringo's album Sentimental Journey. So
Right.
Ringo obviously likes sing-alongs in the Empress Pub. I think he really loves Liverpool. I just wish he'd just said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it. Let's move on. But he didn't. And there we are. He
But
needs me to advise him.
Paul's around there quite a bit, though. He does the college graduation every year.
Oh yeah, I see. In fact, I see Paul quite a lot actually.
Oh,
Not
do
not
you?
not on a matey sort of way, but they made me an associate at Liverpool, which was quite nice because I've been reviewing their stage shows and things. And I remember being in a little clique some years ago with Paul, and he had his mobile phone out, and he said, "Look at this. Here's me with President Obama." And we were all, he was doing it in a way that said, "I'm a Liverpool lad, and here I am with the President of America." And I thought, is President Obama saying, "Oh, look, here's me with Paul McCartney"? I don't know. It was a lovely moment. He always speaks at the graduation ceremony, usually making a few remarks about his parents and about the speech days at the Philharmonic Hall in Liverpool. And Lipper is great. They do some terrific performances there. I don't know whether it's because of the McCartney connection or not, but they've put quite a few Stephen Sondheim musicals on, which, and really they're a sort of amateur company, but he does, and they are done really well. And I've seen Carrie the Musical recently. In fact, I've seen a few things this year and they were really good. And I always feel when I see them, I keep the programs because I think a lot of people in these programs are going to be stars one day. And everybody you meet who goes to Lipper absolutely loves it. It is a great place, I think. Incidentally, I must tell you this, everybody who does music at Lipper gets an exclusive half-hour session with Paul McCartney.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good.
And they're asked not to share details, unfortunately. Having a half hour with Paul McCartney judging your songs must be quite something.
Yeah.
He's a great character.
I've seen pictures of fans outside Lipa on the days that he comes, and everybody gets all excited about that, which they should. But no, that's really great. You were gonna tell me about NEMS. We were talking about NEMS a little earlier. He first learned about them through NEMS, through the records that they were putting out.
The Mersey Beat magazine and the like, yes. Yeah.
Was he doing that with everybody?
He saw there was a scene going on, yes. But the Beatles were the group that he first decided to see. I think he would have seen the Mississippi Jazz Band before then. I don't really believe that it was his first time at the Cavern, because I'm sure he would have gone down there to see some of the jazz, because it had been open since 1957. But the Beatles was probably the first beat group that he saw there, and he was just blown away by them. And he said to Alistair Taylor, "I want to manage them." Some people were already wanting to manage the Beatles, but really they weren't up to it. Alan Williams got them to Hamburg, but he let them down after that. But Brian Epstein knew what he wanted to do, and he's very shrewd, really. Brian Epstein was just right. He was organized. And what I love about Brian Epstein is that he thought, where can I test the Beatles to see how they would go down? And he thought, Southport. Now, Southport is north of Liverpool, about 14 miles north of Liverpool. And if you look at the Beatles chronology of the places they played, all of a sudden when he signs them, he puts them in one place in Southport after another. And it's wonderful. They do very well. Like the Kingsway Casino, the Floral Hall they played. They played the arts, it wasn't the Arts Centre there, it was Cambridge Hall. And they played a lot of gigs in Southport. And they got a real following in Southport. And that, after a few weeks, he realized, I can do something here. And that helped him to get organized, to see what he had to do. It's a great pity now. I have my non-Beatles walk, which I sometimes take people on, Americans who say to me, "Can you take me a walk, Spencer, of Beatle places?" And I say, "I'll give you the non-Beatles walk if you like," because Southport is a good example of the Beatles playing about 9 places there, and nearly all of them have gone. I saw the Beatles in September '63, for example, on a show with Paul and Paula, who did Hey Paula, and Jerry and the Pacemakers. And I said, here we are in the middle of Sainsbury's supermarket. This is where the Beatles appeared. And so many of those places have gone now, and it's a great pity.
What a shame. You wrote 2 books about the firing of Pete Best. And the revised version, which
Rework the catalogue. That's what people say.
the second version called Best of the Beatles, the Sacking and Pete Best, is available on Kindle. It's very readily available. And you really go through the whole thing very thoroughly. I've talked to people in England, and there's been degrees of whether they thought that it should have happened or not. How do you feel about this?
I think he was very unlucky. In my book, I say there are a number of people who had a say in whether Pete Best would go on. And then the other Beatles, obviously, there's George Martin, there's Brian Epstein, and they all had different reasons for wanting to get rid of Pete Best. George quite simply would have preferred his best friend Ringo Starr in the band. But I think one of the crucial things is something that Bob Wooler said to me. I don't believe all the stuff that Pete Best was so good looking and the others didn't get the girls, because they were getting their fair share of girls, so it's not a problem there. But the Beatles were doing a lunchtime session at the Cavern and an evening session at the Cavern. And Bob Wooler was a DJ at the Cavern. And the Beatles decided to leave their equipment on the stage. So the equipment was on the stage, and George and John had gone downtown, probably going to Nems to hear some records, because you could actually hear records in a booth those days. So they'd gone, and there was just Pete Best and Paul left on stage, and the audience had all gone. And Bob Wooler happened to be around, and he said he heard Paul McCartney say to Pete Best, "Get off those drums, this is how you do it." And he was showing Pete how to play the drums. And at the time, Bob misread this because he thought, this is cheeky, isn't it? A bass player shouldn't be showing a drummer how to play the drums. And thought it was a bit off that McCartney did that. But of course, we now know that McCartney's such a perfect musician that if he saw someone doing something wrong, he would want to get them to do it right. Therefore, I think the incident is probably a pretty important point in the Beatles' career. That McCartney thought, we want to write different sorts of songs. This guy isn't up to it. And it's interesting that when I've seen the Beatles, when I've seen Pete Best so many times recently, he retired in the last year, but when I've seen him, he never plays drums on his own. He always has Rogue Best with him. So he had this double drumming.
Yeah, the one time I saw Pete, he did have Rogue with him. I saw him several years ago.
He could do rock and roll, but I think McCartney was realizing that he wasn't up to it. And I think that is the straw that broke the camel's back.
Do you think McCartney was the one that initiated that?
That was crucial. I think McCartney wouldn't have any, after that incident, I doubt if he would have had support from he wouldn't have been supported if the others were putting him down.
If McCartney wasn't supporting him, John probably would have gone along with that, correct?
Yes, John was actually more ambitious than people give him credit for, I think. They both saw that the Beatles could be really big if they had it right. I think it was just Pete's bad luck, unfortunately.
In the Pete Best book, you talk about this CD. Can you see it? It's the Rory Storm and the Hurricanes CD.
Harry Asprey, who's his guitar tech, played it to him. And Ringo said, "That's not me, but I don't know who it is. It sounds like a club drummer." Okay. In other words, it wasn't a drummer he recognized. And Rory somebody must have been ill or something must have happened at the last minute. And Rory needed another drummer for this recording and got this guy who was more used to cabaret clubs.
Yeah, I remember hearing that. And whether or not it was Ringo, it was a great performance. Mark Lewison, when I interviewed him a long time ago, said that he thought Rory Storm and the Hurricanes were not a great group. Do you agree with that?
He was a showman, Rory Storm, and you can hear that. It's interesting that he stuttered in real life, but not on stage. And on that CD, he performs Bill Parsons' All-American Boy, which is a narration, and he doesn't stutter at all in that. So it's interesting. He could deliver the goods, and he looked right, Rory Storm, certainly. But he was just unlucky, really.
What's the Beatle Heritage Committee that you're on doing? What's their work? Is that involved with
it's allied to the council, and we're trying to make sure that things aren't overlooked. Or if things have to be destroyed, a good argument like the St. Salvador Mass, we can put up a good argument and say this shouldn't actually happen. Because we don't want to turn the place into Beatles City, because that would be daft, obviously. But you want to have the right things preserved. And I think it's important to have a committee like that, because you just don't know where things are going to go otherwise, really.
So are there any projects that are coming up that we're going to hear about?
I'll show this. 80 at 80, I suppose it's my autobiography. But I just thought, when I was 80 years old, I thought, I don't want a party. That sounds boring. I want to see The Girl Can't Help It again with Little Richard. And I booked a cinema in Southport and booked a print of The Girl Can't Help It. I did that as the book launch. And it's got lots of tales about the Mersey Beat era in there. It's also got about all my days working in insurance, because I was working in insurance for most of the time. And hopefully it's quite a funny book. And what I'm doing now, which I certainly hope is going to be a funny book, because I'm making myself laugh, is a book about the Pepper people, which is going to be for the anniversary of Sergeant Pepper, the 60th anniversary of Sergeant Pepper next year. And I'm doing profiles of all the people who are on that cover.
One of the people mentioned in Pepper People is Dion DiMucci, and you have a story about him.
Oh, yeah. Well, Dion's a great guy. I mean, he's about the coolest guy in New York City, I think. And I interviewed him a few years ago, and he said, I'd love to know who put me on the cover of Sergeant Pepper. Which of the Beatles chose me? And I said, well, it so happens I'm meeting Peter Blake next week, so I'll ask him. So I went along to Peter Blake, who was doing a promotion of actually something he'd done for Liverpool, which was a special ferry on the Mersey that he designed. I said to him, how did Dion come to be on the cover of Sergeant Pepper? And he said, oh dear, he said, Dion's going to be so disappointed because I picked him. And I thought that was so modest of him. But Peter Blake said he absolutely loved Dion's records. And so Dion was his choice. And there are only two rock and rollers actually on the cover of Sergeant Pepper, which is Dion and Chuck Berry. So an intriguing sleeve.
It really is. That should be very interesting.
Yeah. And there's some 80 at 80 is on Amazon.
It's very available out on Amazon for people that want that. I could sit here and talk to you all day because you got such great stories.
The person that I knew best in the Beatles story, as it were, is Bob Wooler, the DJ at the Cavern, because he was someone who he desperately wanted to tell his story, and yet at the same time he was a very secretive person. And the other day on TV they had a rerun of Harold Pinter in Krapp's Last Play by Samuel Beckett. And I thought, my God, this is pure Bob Wooler. That's exactly like he was, going over things in the past and getting hung up on certain things and not letting them go. And yet at the same time, he knew he had to let them go. And oh dear, dear, dear. I thought it was very sad watching it, because I was thinking of Bob Wooler the whole time I watched it. But I was very glad to do a book on Bob Wooler, because I think it needed to be done, because he was such a witty person. He had so many comments about the beat groups. He gave a lot of them their names. He got the bills together, decided who would be best on a bill with who, and the order of things.
He used to do the introductions at the Cavern.
Oh, yes. And he, to make it special for the Beatles, he put Piltdown Rides Again by the Piltdown Men on. So you have that William Tell overture in overdrive starting, and that tells people the Beatles are appearing, and then they come charging in with a rock and roll song. And I think they all respected Bob Wooler. He was a sad person. He desperately wanted to be a songwriter himself. Amongst his papers, there were so many lyrics that he wrote, and nobody did anything with, really, except that Billy J. Kramer took one of his lyrics once and gave it to George Martin. And the B-side of I'll Keep You Satisfied is a song called I Know, which Bob Wooler and George Martin wrote. And Bob used to get little checks for that, sort of £5 a year because of it, because it would appear on the compilations and the like. But he was someone who really wanted to do much more with his life, but he didn't. But it's tragic, really. And he is a Beckettian. In the midst of all this glorious rock and roll, you've got someone who really is like Samuel Beckett.
Mm. Just give me a little idea of your relationship with the guys.
I only saw the Beatles a couple of times, once in Southport, and I saw them on the bill with Roy Orbison. And that was at the Liverpool Empire. And that was very interesting because Bruce Baxter, I think his name, was one of the band for Roy Orbison.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to Bruce many years later, how did Roy Orbison get on with this? Because he wouldn't have heard of the Beatles before he came to England in 1963, and they were taking over the show, and he was a star. And he said, "Oh, it didn't bother Roy at all." He said they were all screaming when he came on, and Roy just went very quietly. "A candy-coloured clown they call the Sandman, tiptoed into my room every night." And because he did it so quietly, everybody stopped screaming. And then as soon as they stopped screaming, he went into In Dreams. So he knew exactly how to deal with it. That's real stagecraft, isn't it? Being able to do that. Because other singers had a great deal of trouble being on the same bill with the Beatles, but Orbison didn't. And Orbison, of course, was a great friend of George Harrison's, and they made that wonderful album, 2 albums, as the Travelling Wilburys, but Orbison wasn't on the second album. What I like about George is that he has a very good sense of humor, dry sense of humor that appeals to me a lot. And even though there are a lot of very serious moments with him, there are also some very funny moments too. And I feel sorry that he was in a group where you had Lennon and McCartney writing songs, and it was so hard to get his own songs on there. If he'd been in any other group, fine, they'd have welcomed him with open arms.
Mm.
But on the other hand, I was talking a few years ago to Bill Wyman, and he said, "Oh, I envy George Harrison," because he said, "I only got 2 songs on the Rolling Stones album." It depends what angle you're looking at it from. But George, I like, and I love his songs. And that song on the last album, Any Road, Fairport Convention do a very good job of that. And yeah, and you can see that Any Road is a real folk rock type of song. It's perfect for a folk rock band. They did it very well. But they're a band that has been going since 1968. No, 1967. They started the same time as Sgt. Pepper, and they're still going. So I love it that these bands have this real longevity, really.
Was there a soft side to John?
There probably was. But I did say to Roger McGough once, who was with Scaffold and is the best poet to come out of Liverpool, I said, "You love playing with words. Bob Wooler loved playing with words. John Lennon loved playing with words. There must have been terrific conversations between the three of you." And he said, "Yes, but never with John there." John just wasn't interested in trying to better someone who was already very good with words. He perhaps knew his place, really. I don't know. But John is the most mercurial of the Beatles, of course, because he does so many different things. I think Paul got a bad press in the 1970s because he did some daft records like Mary Had a Little Lamb and the Rupert song, of course. But there's no reason why people shouldn't do children's songs. You can't judge them by one song. And he did, of course, Give Ireland Back to the Irish. And I think, too, that he wrote the best Bond song ever in Live and Let Die. I just think that's a magnificent song.
It is.
Yeah. And I love it when it's performed with the fire coming up and everything. Although I gather you have to invite the fire brigade along to the rehearsal so they can pass it before you actually do it in a town. But that's great, Live and Let Die. And George, I just like the way he just went about his own career when the Beatles left and the solo albums he made. Not always great, but there's a lot of very good songs there. And he just seemed a very contented person, really.
Spencer, this has been really a joy to talk to you. We could go on for hours because hearing the Liverpool stories is just great. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it. And again, your book is available at Amazon and everywhere.
Yes, it is. Yep, yep. It's a good read. People, well, I hope it's a good read. People may think, oh, we don't want this because it's not about a particular artist or anything, but there are lots of stories in it and excerpts from interviews I've done and all sorts of things. And the interviews that go wrong, Leon Russell and things like that, where you think an interview's going to go right and something goes wrong. So all that's in the book. I hope I haven't written a book that says I'm great.
What happened with Leon?
You'll have to read the book to find out. But it's not an experience I want to relive, but there we are.
There we go. All right. Thank you again. Best of luck to you, and keep trying to save all those sites in Liverpool for us. We're talking with Luis Lopez, who was one of those lucky guys. There was 30 people now that that's the exact number, correct?
It's in between 30 and 40. I'm pretty sure I counted 39, but I was like so nervous that I.
But anyway, he was one of the lucky 39 that went to the Paul McCartney listening session. Was it last Thursday? Is that when it was?
Yeah, a week ago.
And he couldn't talk about it. We actually did talk a little bit about it a few days ago. And what I wrote on Substack was from his words. But now the NDA is gone. And that's really interesting that they dropped it so quickly. But as you say, as we were talking about this before we started, the Billboard article and actually the Variety too also helped. They said pretty much what the fans weren't allowed to say. So what did they do? Did they send you a note and say the NDA was no big deal now, or?
Basically send us an email saying feel free to talk about it on social media, whatever platforms that you see fit, except the only thing you can't say is obviously where the address of the actual, like, where the listening party was held. But we can say at least like the general location, like kind of like how the Variety and Billboard articles say where it generally was.
Okay, because Billboard did indicate where the session was.
Just not the exact address.
They didn't have the address. So let's start at the beginning. You got an email out of the blue.
I did.
Correct?
Yep, I sure did.
And I've seen, and a copy of it has been floating around. You can find it on social media. But it basically said you're invited to a secret listening party with Paul McCartney's new album. That's what it was. They did not say he was going to be there.
I mean, the email didn't say that.
So you went, and I saw the picture of you outside the tower.
Yes.
You can't miss outside the tower because of the stars on the sidewalk. And you were pointing to Paul's star, which is just a few feet away from the door.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you get there, and what happened? What happens next?
All of us are like lining up and we're like chatting in line, where you're from, that sort of thing, kind of getting to know each other. And actually there was somebody else there. Her name's Beth, that I've known through like Paul's concerts and stuff like that. So I actually knew at least one other person. But it was really fun to get to know people's like backgrounds and stuff like that, and kind of like getting all excited, kind of like Magical Mystery Tour style. Big shepherd on buses to an unknown location to hear the new Paul McCartney records. All of us were like buzzing with excitement, of course.
Did you ever figure out what the common thread was between you guys?
As far as I know, there's no like magic bullet, so to speak, for the selection. It was a range of people in their 20s, people in their 30s, people in their 60s. There was no like one through line for how we got selected. It was totally randomized.
But they had to, obviously, it had to be people in the local area, because
Yeah, probably. Most people I talked to were in and around the LA area. Somebody was from Tustin, another person was from Orange. I myself am from the Valley. Another person's from Atwater Village. So it was like a good microcosm of the Southern California area.
But it was all Southern California. There's nobody flying in from anywhere else.
As far as I know, I didn't get to talk to everybody, but from who I talked to, it was like people based in Southern California.
Okay. And you couldn't bring anybody with you. You couldn't bring a +1.
Nope.
Which probably got a few people in trouble, but that's the way that is. So you go in. What happens before you get on the bus?
Okay, so there was like a check-in table, and they gave us like a little tote bag with a hat and a shirt in it. And then we check in, we show them our IDs, and they made us sign the NDA, which I mean was the shortest lived NDA of all time. But they gave us the yonder pouches to put in our phones or Apple Watches if we were wearing Apple Watches. And we just waited a little while, and they shepherded us onto the buses, and we just made our merry way down the 101.
Okay. You didn't get to walk around the inside. You probably have been inside the tower before, I would.
Yes, I've been in there, not to brag, several times because of the Ringo birthday thing. So I've poked my head around Capitol a few times over there.
Right. Yeah, I've been there too, and it's one of the coolest places.
It really is. The first time I met Ringo was in Studio A. I was along with Chris, and it was, oh my God, like I'm meeting a Beatle in Capitol Studios. This is wild to me.
We should tell people what you do.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
they're talking about meeting Ringo. Why is he meeting Ringo? What do you do on the side?
I help produce Breakfast with the Beatles with Chris Carter, mainly the Sirius show. I'm involved with the one on KLOS, the 95.5, but it's mainly the Sirius show and his British Invasion show, both on Sirius.
Okay. Okay. And you've been doing that for quite a while.
Yeah, I've been working with Chris since like 2012. So yeah,
We should sit down sometime and talk about the stories that you have because I bet there's
I have a lot.
I bet there's some good stories out of that show. Can you tell one? Maybe
Um,
involving a Beatle, maybe, or
yeah, it's Beatle adjacent, but this is a funny story. I'll tell the first story. The first time I met Ringo.
okay.
The first time I met Ringo was in Capitol Studios. We were in Studio A, and the way it was set up, it was Ringo was promoting his new album at the time, Postcards from Paradise. So he invited a bunch of like radio people and music people to interview him about the album. And one of the people he invited was Chris, and Chris invited me to go along with him. And we were in Studio A, and there's two chairs set up on one side, then one chair set up. So like Ringo was sitting in one, and then like Chris and I was sitting in the other two chairs. And I was sitting in one of them waiting for Ringo to show up. And Ringo walks in the room and he points at me and he's, Chris, you've changed. Because I look nothing like Chris. So I thought that was really funny. And it helped diffuse any sort of nervousness I had. And then after the interview was over, he like points at me again and he's, you did such a great job sitting so quietly during the interview. It was really funny. That was my experience meeting Ringo for the first time.
Another scary story: the day that Paul got his star. Anyway, Paul's star, Neil Young was there.
Yep.
Elvis Costello was there. Dana Krall was there, who I love her music so much, and it was so great to see her. But anyway, Paul comes over, and they had put a fence between the press and the fans, and somebody had brought a Hofner bass replica, and they got Paul's attention. They're going, Paul, look. And Paul goes, send it this way. He was going to sign it. And he did. He signed it standing right in front of me. So I'm
Wow.
like about within 10 feet and he's signing. He had just released Kisses on the Bottom. And I
Okay,
should
yeah.
have, and he was there. He was at the tower doing that weekend, doing a live broadcast. But anyway, I took pictures of him. He signs the thing and he gives it and he sends it back and it gets back to the guy. And I talked to the person after the ceremony and I interviewed him and he was just like thrilled that Paul had signed
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. I'd be like bouncing off the walls or something like that.
Yeah. it. Where that bass guitar is today, I don't know. If you are the guy that
Hopefully safely locked away in some
Yeah.
vault.
But anyway. All right. So you're on the bus.
Yes.
You don't know where you're going.
No. Yeah, so we're driving down the 101 and we were all trying to figure out exactly where are we going? Are we going to like maybe Paul's house in Bel Air? Or we're going to somewhere in Beverly Hills? Where are we going? And eventually we gather that we're just somewhere in the San Fernando Valley because we get off at Woodman. I don't know how familiar you are with like the
I'm not.
Okay.
I get lost every time I'm down there.
So we get off at Woodman, we turn right, then we make another left on I think on Magnolia, then we make another right into this residential area. Okay, what are we doing? So we're just going to some random house in the San Fernando Valley, not really knowing the significance of it quite yet. So we get there, they kind of get us off the buses, we gather in the front yard, and then we continue walking to the back area. And weirdly enough, I don't know why, I don't know, but there was a bust of Paul McCartney in the backyard. I don't know if that was just there for that night or if it's a permanent thing.
Wow.
But yeah. So anyway, we go to this back area and it's a recording studio. Basically, it's like the area where the musicians would be. Like there's like these big speakers. So you like when you're tracking something and you can hear the playback. That's where basically where you can see a glass partition with the computer and the console in the background. And we're sitting there, and there's a film crew in there, and there's these two chairs set up, and that's when I saw pictures like the day before that Paul was in town, and I like maybe figured out that he'd probably be there, but that's when the gears started turning. I'm like, oh yeah, he's going to be here. They have a film crew. They have two chairs. They're not just going to film us like reacting to the album. That'd be boring. So that's when I put two and two together. And it's like nervous energy. Okay, like when are we going to start listening to the album? What's going to happen here? Blah, 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 blah. And I check my watch, and about 7 p.m. in walks Paul McCartney, and it's Beatlemania 1964 all over again.
Were you the only one that figured out that Paul was? Did everybody figure out? Were you guys talking among yourselves, or were you able to talk?
Yeah, I mean, some of us were like chatting amongst ourselves, and like not all of us came to a definitive conclusion, but we were definitely like whispers were like, could he be here? Could he show up? Is he going to be here? Like that sort of thing. So it was kind of like that nervous sort of, I don't know, like first date kind of energy in a way. So that's the kind of the mood like before he showed up was.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he shows up.
He shows up, Beatlemania 1964. Everybody's going nuts. We're all like, just like ecstatic.
Nobody tried to rush the stage.
No, none of that. We probably get thrown out if that were to happen.
Right.
So he walks in, he takes his seat, and Andrew Watt also walks in behind him too, who produced the album. He also produced the Hackney Diamonds, the last Rolling Stones record. And basically there's a laptop in between them, and they basically for the next like hour and change walk us through the entire album. Like they play a song, then Paul has commentary in between, like how he wrote the song, stuff like that. And it was a cool thing to experience because it wasn't like the same rehearsed stories that we've heard Paul tell over the decades. I like to say, oh, I wrote yesterday while I heard it in the dream, or Let It Be is about my, that sort of thing. So it was really cool to hear that.
You had said, and they were filming all this, and it's interesting that that I don't think you told me last time that we talked that he did all those stories, because that would be something to use to promote the album.
Right.
So we could very well see all this pretty soon.
Yeah.
But anyway, he didn't fool around very much, did he, or did he? You know how he is at the concerts where I'll drink it in and all this. He wasn't.
No, he wasn't like shticky, so to speak, but he definitely wasn't in a good mood. You'd be in a good mood too if you were like in that small setting promoting your new record and stuff like that. So he was definitely like joking around and funny and that sort of thing. Yeah, and I don't know if they're gonna like what they're gonna do with that footage, if they're gonna release it like in a full on kind of thing or bits and pieces, but I'm like eager to see what they do with it. So
I assume that he told you about Ringo being on the album. Is that?
yes.
Let me ask, because I did not ask you this last time. How did you like the album as a whole?
I liked it a lot. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan and the fact that he was in the room with me at the same time.
Right.
Sonically, I probably compare it to like the better parts of Egypt Station and a bit of Flaming Pie. That's what I would compare it to. I really liked it a lot.
Okay. Were there any other guest appearances? Is the band on?
No, he plays all the instruments himself. Andrew Watt plays some guitar, but it's all him. It's all Paul.
So this is like McCartney 4.
Or 5 even. There's other albums that are not called McCartney 1, 2, 3 that feature him playing all the instruments. Yeah.
What's the song that Ringo is on?
Home to Us.
Home to Us. Does he sing on this song?
Ringo? Yeah. Oh, yeah. They basically like trade lines back and forth. Basically.
Oh, really?
That's how it works. Yeah.
That's definitely interesting because he's never done that kind of thing with Paul before.
Yeah, not like trading lines back and forth. I guess like the closest is kind of Walk With You and Why Not, where in the choruses.
He's only released one song in advance.
So far it's only just Days We Left Behind right now.
I wonder if that song will be the next song that they preview.
I don't know. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, it would seem to be a logical thing to do. Any other tracks stand out to you?
There was a couple other songs that I really liked. Ripples in a Pond was really good. It was kind of like a rocker. Another one was like Mountaintop, which was also really good. And I mean, there were a few other songs I really liked too. Like the rockers were really good. Lost Horizon is another one.
And it should be noted that somebody tried to put out a fake Lost Horizon, and
Oh, yeah, the AI generated one.
that was completely dispelled. In fact, Bill King, hello, Bill. Bill King went to the McCartney press office and asked, and they said, nope, it's not even close. So that was interesting. I pretty well figured it was somebody's AI generated thing anyway. I'm glad we got the answer down for that because that would have probably gone on. I'm glad they ended that right away.
Yeah, they put the lid on that pretty quick, which,
Right.
they had to.
They did. So they gave you a shirt? Were they all album stuff? Is that what they gave you?
Yeah, it's basically like the stuff you can get on his website. Like the hat says Dungeon Lane on it, and then the shirt is like the Dungeon Lane like sign, and then the song titles on the back.
You didn't wear it.
No, I didn't wear it. I haven't worn it yet. No.
Oh, you haven't worn it yet?
No, I haven't worn it yet. Not that I'm
Okay.
like saving it for a special occasion. I just haven't worn it yet.
Oh, okay. Such is life. Has Chris got any surprises for the show that you can reveal?
Not that I know of. We had Morgan Neville a few weeks back, which was really cool. He actually reached out to Chris.
Did he?
Yeah, he's a local guy, and basically he treats Breakfast with the Beatles here in LA as an institution. Like on Sundays, that's what he does, like listens to the show. So he wanted to appear on the show. It was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. He was super, super nice, and it was a great conversation.
Who else have you guys had lately?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it, really, for this so far. It's only April, so
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. Morgan Neville is great.
yeah, he was super, super nice, and it was a great conversation, and yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
I'm glad I can actually talk a little more directly about stuff and not be like, I don't know if I can talk about that.
And tell Chris I said hello and give him my best. Thank you very much. I'm going to
Yeah.
switch this off here. I want to talk a little bit about the movie Peter Asher Everywhere Man, which is screening right now in film festivals and will open in June in theaters around the country. It's a great, great movie. It really, really is. It goes through his whole life. It starts with his young years as an actor. He acted in a movie as a child with Claudette Colbert. He was on the TV series The Adventures of Robin Hood with Richard Green. And in one episode, his sister Jane starred with him. And in '62, he met Gordon Waller, and they started working together as Peter and Gordon. And they got a contract from EMI. And their first big hit was World Without Love, written for them by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And the film goes into the story quite deeply on that. It's a great story because McCartney had the song half finished, and Peter had asked him to let them record it, and McCartney said fine. And when it came to recording day, McCartney didn't have it finished, and they said, Paul, we need the song right now. And so he went into a room and finished it, and they recorded it, and it became #1 in Europe and America. And that wasn't the only Lennon and McCartney song that he wrote for them. They also had plenty of other hits too. They continued until 1968, I believe it was, and they broke up. Peter at that point worked for Apple Records, and he became their A&R man. One of his first productions, actually, as a record producer, or his very first, was Paul Jones of Man from Man doing And the Sun Will Shine. But he discovered James Taylor at Apple Records, and James had his first album there. And it didn't go over very well. James in the movie calls it a work in progress. So they left Apple, and James was signed to Warner Brothers, which of course brought the huge hit Fire and Rain and the album Sweet Baby James. And the rest is history. Peter has gone on to produce many artists, notably Linda Ronstadt, Robin Williams. Yes, he produced a comedy album for Robin Williams, and Robin Williams won a Grammy for that. James had several hit albums after that. Peter teamed up with Linda Ronstadt, and she became a great hit for him. She won a Grammy in 1977 for Best Female Pop Vocal for Hasten Down the Wind. And Peter has gone on to continue to work in the record industry. He has done movie scores with Hans Zimmer. He has worked with numerous artists. One of the more recent ones was Barbra Streisand. It's just a fantastic story. And the movie goes through his life, and they dig up some great, great archival clips. They really surprised me with some of the stuff that they came through with. And of course, it tells about his reunion with Gordon Waller later in, that was, I believe, in 19. We reunited with Gordon Waller in 1976, and they had been playing at gigs almost regularly. And then Peter's been going out on his own playing. He has played with Jeremy Clyde of Chad and Jeremy. He's done all sorts of stuff. He's done shows on his own, a great cabaret show that we've seen several times, and it's well worth seeing. And these days, he's still doing it. But the movie is just so good. It tells some things you probably don't know. In fact, it tells a lot of things you probably don't know because he doesn't mention some of this stuff in his memoirs show, as it's called. But the movie is well worth seeing. It'll be in film festivals from now until early June, when it'll start hitting theaters all over the country. And we can't say enough about this. I did an interview with Dan Geller and Dana Goldfein, the co-directors of the film, and you can find it on YouTube. Really the first interview that they have done about the movie, and we go through some of the makings of the movie, and there's some great stories that they tell in there, and I hope you'll check that out. But check out the movie. The movie is just wonderful. It really, really is. That's all for today. Thanks to Spencer Leigh and to Luis Lopez for being our guests. I just want to say a few words about Ringo's album, Long, Long Road, which is coming out almost the minute this is going out. We've heard the album, and I'm not going to go through a lot of detail here, but I will say I think it's a better album than Look Up. It's a more country album, and to that end, Ringo sounds a lot more comfortable singing on this album than he did on Look Up. You've heard the preview tracks, Long, Long Road, and his new version of Choose Love, which I will say it really sounds out of place, but it's still a good song. And I really think you'll like the album, especially if you're a country fan, of course. But even if you're not, if you're a Ringo fan, you'll like the album. He did a great job with this one. He really did. So that's it. Until next time, we'll have more guests and more great talk. And we hope you'll be there for us. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. If you like what we do, if you like this episode, give us a like. That always helps, even if you're a subscriber. If you have any comments or suggestions, write to BeatlesNewsBriefs@gmail.com and we'll take a look at them. So, in any event, this is Steve Marinucci saying, be seeing you.